Good morning. From your movements, I could tell you had a restful night. You slept well. You were warm enough. So my part in the retreat is to offer you some insights so that you could take it through the day as the day unfolds and you begin to open yourselves more and more. Think about being in a dialogue or a retreat. It is as if there is an ending to every day and a beginning to every new day. So at night, it is as if we close the book, and in the morning, we open the book again, the book of life. But in between the closing and the opening, in that state of unconsciousness, life continues, life never stops. And so today I thought of offering you a couple of spiritual gifts. And these gifts were offered to me when I began my spiritual journey. And as a kid, I was born in a Hindu religion, but I went to a Catholic school in terms of high school. And because I didn't know Hindi, I couldn't relate so much to remember the Hindi prayers. But at night, before I close my book and go into that state of unconsciousness, I would say a prayer. And those of you may know this prayer. And it was, this night as I lay down to sleep, I pray thee, Lord, my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray thee, Lord, my soul to take. Now I used to say it as a, okay, it's a nice thing, I like it. But then when I was in my early 20s, I was introduced to Raj Yoga. I was about 19. And I heard the word soul. And of course, I connected it to this prayer I used to say. And I was told that the soul is life. And I was told that life is beautiful. And so I started associating soul to life and life to beauty. And then I started understanding what life is all about, this thing called soul that I used to say to God, I offer you my soul, and if I should die, keep my soul. What was this all about? So my interest, I got engaged in the word soul. But what I didn't anticipate at that early age, that life, a soul, was something quite intriguing. And to really connect to soul and life, it took me on a lifelong learning. I'm still learning about it. I'm still discovering myself, and in so doing, discovering others. But what happened to me as I was discovering myself, I got quite obsessed with thoughts. I started seeing soul through thoughts. And everything I did, I measured it on the basis of my thoughts. And one day, right here at Peace Village, you heard about her. Her name is Daddy Janki. And she took me for a walk around that little pond that we call the mini lake. And she spoke very little English, but she understood you absolutely and totally. So she held my hand. She said, let's go for a walk. Because she used to like to walk, and she was in her 90s, and she was still walking around the lake, that mini pond, mini lake. And she said to me, well, what efforts are you making these days? And I said, oh, Daddy, I'm working on transformation. And I was so proud. And she said, okay, tell me about it. And I said, you know, Daddy, I can transform my thoughts like that. I can change my way of thinking from a certain pattern, and I could change it into whatever pattern I want. So she listened and she listened and she listened. And she says, how about your feelings? And I never connected transformation to feelings. I just thought it was thoughts, you just change your thoughts and everything else changed. And she said that if you didn't change your feelings, changing at the level of just thoughts was not complete transformation. You just couldn't change the way you thought about something. For transformation to be complete, you had to change the way you felt about something. So then I said, well, what do I do? Because somehow I've missed the whole point. And she said, don't think. You think too much. You live in your head. You live in your mind. You're thinking, thinking, thinking. And you are controlling yourself by controlling your thoughts. And this is not what transformation is all about. It's a healing process. It's a transforming process. It's a process that's done with love. So then she says, I'll give you two gifts. I'll remind you of two gifts that were given to you, but you forgot about them at the time you were awakened and you chose to walk this path that is called a transformative path or a spiritual path. And she says that you're given actually two gifts. The moment you choose to do that and you make that decision, two gifts, it's like grace gifts from God, actually are offered to you. One is the divine eye, that is called the soul, and the other is a divine intellect. And I got very fascinated by both, because she said the divine eye, the soul, is very important when it comes to seeing. She said, seeing is your responsibility. How you see is very important, because how you choose to see is exactly what you will see. So when you have a third eye, when you become conscious of yourself as a soul, you're conscious of yourself as life, you're conscious of yourself as beauty. And then when you see things as living. You know, this concept of a living system in terms of matter, but also the system, the soul is living. So you'll see things as living, but you'll also see things as beautiful, because life, by its very nature, is beautiful. So the divine eye allows you to do that. But then she said about the divine intellect as a gift, a grace gift from God. And at that time, I was at the United Nations as well. And in the Human Rights Charter, Declaration of Human Rights, it states that all human beings are born free and equal, endowed with reason and conscience. And so this divine intellect, which is a grace gift from God, and the divine eye, is actually connected to reason and conscience. So this divine intellect is what I'm offering you today. And of course, the divine eye is the soul, life. And I'll share a little bit about the divine intellect that I feel is very important in understanding soul, in understanding life. When we look at soul, or look at the inner landscape of soul and life, in a very simple way, we're told we have three main abilities. One is the mind, and the mind is very connected to the senses, and the mind is driven by the senses. So the senses impact and will influence the mind first, and then there's an impact of that influence. But it's this kind of connection, the mind to the senses to matter, matter to the external world. Then there's the intellect, and the intellect is our filtering system. The intellect filters what enters the mind. The intellect is my voice of conscience. The intellect is my ability to discern. The intellect is where my choices are made. The intellect is where the reasoning happens. The intellect is what remembers. The intellect is what connects. And then the other part of me are my characteristics. That which carries the memories and carries the patterns of my character and my characteristics and my personality traits, all of that is there. But the intellect, which is my divine gift, is something that would help balance all those characteristics that are within me, lying in my subconscious, as well as my conscious being, and also all that's coming through the mind from the outer world. And my intellect now has this responsibility to bring these pieces together so that I can appear and I can cultivate a presence that is whole and is not fragmented. At the time Daddy Yankee told me not to think, I said, well, Daddy, if I were to understand the soul, thoughts and feelings is what are the two main expressions of the soul. So how do I differentiate between the thoughts that come in and out of the mind and thoughts, and how do I differentiate my intellect from my mind, basically at the level of thinking? She said to me that the intellect, the divine intellect as a gift, means that the intellect has the ability to connect to the intrinsic qualities in the soul. The intellect is what will bring me back to reaffirm the faith in my own dignity and worth. And my dignity and worth emerge out of the intrinsic qualities of the soul, just truth, love, peace, joy, and purity. So these are intrinsic. That's where my dignity comes from. That's where my worth comes from. And what the intellect is thirsty for, and that is why the ego lives in the intellect. The I and my, the me and mine are all things of the intellect. And the reason that is so is that the intellect is connecting a lot to an acquired sense of self that came from the external. It came from what I acquired as an identity that was not true to the soul. So we call it a body conscious identity. And now the intellect is confused. It's been clogged by these layers of identity. But what the intellect is seeking is the truth, is to return to an authenticity, is to return to a true sense of being, is to return to who am I in it as my authentic self. So it got so filtered with an acquired identity that it now needs to cleanse itself. So she said that living in the intellect is a very important area that I should connect to if I want to transform at the level of feelings. And she said there's a heart in the intellect. And this heart, in Hindi, it's called preet. It carries a love, a very deep love the intellect carries. And it's a love for truth. The intellect wants to reconnect to the truth that lives within the soul. And that is why truth cannot be told to us. We can have teachings, but it is the intellect that will take the teachings into the mirror of its heart and connect to its truth, from which the experience of truth emerges. So it's a beautiful thing that I can listen to teachings. But what would I do with all the teachings that I hear? It will come through the mind. My ear will listen to it. It will enter the mind. So Daddy's saying, what's the difference between how the intellect would operate and how the mind would operate? So she said, the teachings will enter my ear. It will come and sit there, and then the intellect would observe what is going on at the level of thoughts and take it to a higher level. And the higher level is, how do I experience those thoughts? How do I take it and connect it to the truth within me? So I then said to myself, as I got more and more intrigued with this divine intellect, maybe my intellect has ears. So when the mind is this physical sense of hearing, brings all that I'm hearing and holds it there. The mind is a container holding thoughts, and it will tumble the thoughts. It's like a fan in the room. It will circulate the same air in the room. So the mind is like a fan. It will keep thinking what it's heard coming in from the outside. But then the intellect, the divine intellect, will want to connect what I'm hearing to what is divine within me. And what I'm reaffirming, what the intellect is doing for me, it's reaffirming an identity that is spiritually divine. And so the intellect will take those thoughts and connect it to my divinity, and then bring me to a higher level of thinking. And so if I can, the intellect will hear it. And this is part of discerning, that whatever comes into the mind, my divine intellect would want to connect it to my divinity. But if I don't use the divine intellect, my ordinary intellect will connect it to whatever is selfish within me, the ego, the I, and the mind, whatever I want as selfishness. But if it connects it to the divinity within me, then it opens up something that's bigger there within me. So my listening wouldn't just be self-centered. My listening would be a bigger listening. I would be listening to the whole. I would be listening to the meaning behind the words. I'd be listening to how does it elevate my state of being. So the intellect would be working with that. How does it emerge from within me, that which is true? How are these words impacting me? What's the influence that it's leaving within me? So that's what the intellect is doing. The intellect also has a voice. And Mukul and I were talking yesterday, and he was telling me about this inner voice. And then he said to me, but it's not my voice. It's a higher voice. So I think this voice that has gone so silent, when we see injustices in the world, don't be silent. Speak up. We're told that. And sometimes we are afraid to speak up because we could see the injustice, but we don't want to give up privileges. And we know if we speak up, we'll be giving up something. Something will be taken away from us. And I've had that experience many times. But then what's the voice that we cannot afford to keep silent within? That's the voice of the intellect. And the voice of the intellect is my voice of conscience. And if that voice of conscience is kept silent, the intellect malfunctions. The intellect fights inside with me. How can you do that? And then, of course, I project and blame others. I blame the system. And so that the divine intellect connects me to this voice of conscience. But the voice of conscience is, I think, where the most grime and dust, and it's really, really clogged. And how do I clean out my filter of the intellect, which is my voice of conscience? And this is where the enlightenment comes in. So when I'm looking at my intellect, don't look at it as an intellect, just an intellect that's fighting for justice. But go back to the love that lives in the intellect, the heart that is there in the intellect. And when I look into that mirror of love, I'm going to see the truth. And it is the truth that sets me free. Because it's the truth about myself. It's not so much a truth about what's happening out there, but it's a truth about my own worth. It's the truth about the dignity that lies within me and the dignity that I want to uphold in the other. The worth that is within me and the worth I want to uphold in the other. This whole thing about, we learn in Africa when I was there, this Ubuntu statement, I am because you are. So how do I uphold something spiritually meaningful and sacred in another if my conscience doesn't set me free to tell me that this is what I have within me and this is who I am as a being? So I offer these things to you today. I offer you this gift of a divine intellect because I feel that much of the work we'll be doing for today, let's start with today, is going to take me to my mind. And I'm going to be looking at myself just through the thoughts. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, not this, I'm not that. I want to be this, but I cannot be that because, you know, and all of these things, the what, the why, the when, the where, the who. But the divine intellect will help me make sense and meaning of what I'm hearing and what I want to connect to inside of me. What is it I want to emerge? That intellect will help me. Because my intellect, as I said, the intellect remembers things. One of the beautiful things about being life, being a soul, and understanding the beauty of life is to know that I'm not a victim of life. Life cannot victimize me if I'm living in the consciousness of life. And so we call it soul consciousness. I'm living in the consciousness of being a soul. Now, when I'm in the consciousness of being a soul, an awareness will emerge. So I'm living in the consciousness of being a soul. Who am I? What is the awareness I have of myself in relation to this situation I happen to be in at the moment? So this thing of mindfulness, you know, I'm mindful of the moment I'm in. So I'm connected to everything in the moment. But the intellect is going to guide me in terms of, well, who are you in relation? What's the awareness in relation to this mindfulness I'm experiencing? Who am I in relation to this? And then the divine intellect will connect me to the intrinsic qualities, the divine qualities within me. And then that's how I will see that situation. So how I see it, I'm responsible for seeing it, is going to be dependent on how what I connect to within me. That's exactly how I'm going to see it. And so this thing of when I change, the world changes is the way I see what is outside of me based on what I'm seeing inside of me. And so we are, with this divine intellect today, we're going to use it to make meaning of what we are hearing. We're also going to use it to connect to the divinity within so that I could see differently on the outside. But the intellect, as I said, also remembers. This word, the word is, I'm recalling things that are already within me. And I think it's a very powerful inner position to have, that, well, however I'm going to make meaning of what I am experiencing in the world is coming from what I'm remembering that is living inside of me. And I think that is a very, very powerful tool not to be influenced by things outside of me. Because if I'm remembering, there's an element of, yes, this is who I am in relation to this. So whatever is emerging out of me, I'm remembering it as something that I am. And that builds a capacity within me that gives me confidence. You see, the capacity that is built within gives me a confidence to make my choices. And the choice I will make is dependent on how I'm seeing myself on the inside. And that will be the choice that I will make of how I will see others. Now, finally, the capacity I'm talking about is that when the soul depends, the full being, depends on this power of my intellect to discern, to decide, to choose. It depends on the intellect to remember things. It depends on the intellect to connect to the conscience. It depends on the intellect to guide the soul in the direction it wants to go. So when I'm working with my intellect in this way, the intellect is moving out of just being intellectual, is moving out of just looking at things at a superficial level and trying to master and control things. But the intellect is moving more into exploring, into experiencing, and into emerging things that are coming from within me. So it's building an inner capacity within me. And that inner capacity gives me a sense of meaning, of beauty, of direction. And it balances the mind with the characteristics. And so I'm not working in silos, but I'm working as a full being. And so let's take this gift today. And let's remember that the soul is not just about thoughts and thinking at the level of in, out, in, out, in, out. But I have this beautiful divine gift, which is a grace gift from God. Let me just use it. Let me listen with it. Let me speak with it. Let me give sound to that silent conscience. And let me connect it to my divinity so that the beauty could return to what I call life, to what I am, the soul, so that my awareness could be one that I'm responsible for in the way it expresses itself through my senses. So with that, I'll invite you now into a reflection. And I would like you to go back to your childhood days and think about that fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty. Remember Sleeping Beauty? So I'm going to use that for our reflection today. So sit comfortably. I, the soul. I'm a living being. I'm life. And life is beautiful. I forgot about the beauty of my life. When I fell into the slumber of ignorance, thinking that I was just a body, a body with a mind. And I went deeper and deeper into sleep. With this consciousness of the limited. And then one day, I was awoken by the kiss of the divine intellect. And I remember I could see with divine insight. I could see my beauty again. My beauty is connected to seeing the soul as a divine being. My divine intellect returns me to the love that lives within. My divine intellect connects me to the truth that lies in the depths of my being. And this truth sets me free. And opens the conscience. My divine intellect shows me the joy of being who I am, a worthy being, a being with dignity. My divine intellect is my friend. Is my companion. Is my dependable guide. It reaffirms in me that every step I take moves me closer to the destination. The destination that is unique to me. A destination that emerges with every step I take. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. That was beautiful. We're gonna move over to breakfast, and then that's for about 45 minutes, and then back here at 9 o'clock. Om Shanti.